So I'm in the Faulconer Gallery at Grinnell College in Grinnell, Iowa, and I'm going to give you a quick tour, not so quick maybe, of the exhibition Irresistible Images, which is drawn from my collection of early photography. I will try to be as succinct as possible, but it is a bit of a sprawling exhibition, so bear with me. So the exhibition starts with kind of an introduction to processes, early 19th century processes, most obviously the daguerreotype, with some interesting daguerreotypes that are arrayed along one wall, a de Prangis, which is a pretty early daguerreotype, of Cairo balconies, which I don't know if you can see, and then a brief overview of like sizes of that the daguerreotypes came in, a broadsheet, and on the other side of the gallery, if we take a walk over there, we'll see a group of some of the earlier images that I selected from my collection, early daguerreotypes. Again, they don't show up hell of a well in the video, but they are there, as well as other examples, a Southworth and Hawes, a stereo view. And from there we segue into, and in conjunction with the early processes, we're also looking at salt prints. So there are under wraps here 3 Talbots, some of them from the Pencil of Nature, some of them from other publications, like Pictures of Scotland. There's the bust of Patroclus, and there are also other elements of salt prints, a negative from Dr. John Murray, and a Hill and Adamson, which I've had for a long time, which is on this wall here. So the viewer gets a sort of crash course in various early processes, and from there we segue onto the sort of the images object. So various display strategies, whether they're cased or framed in various iterations, which are in this case here, the breakdown of a case, and then some sort of later things too. So this lampshade, these early celluloid buttons, a Japanese ambrotype, and various other formulations, including some Daguerrean jewelry, a hair bracelet, and a minor sort of example of cases. Ambrotypes are also obviously in this early section, and in conjunction with the sort of photography as object and the jewelry, there's a locket which is very nicely splayed, and one of my favorite objects, which is this memorial mug, or this commemorative mug, which has got this gorgeous like portrait on the bottom. That segues into sort of the next chunk, the next little chapter of the exhibition, which introduces us to tintypes and their various sizes, and again various presentation strategies for them, whether it's decorative mats or casings or albums of various cases, or various types at least. And from there we go on to sort of card images. So most notably the carte de visite in an album there, but if we go here we'll see an uncut Disdery sheet and a cut CDV, and of course with that all is cabinet cards with a little broadsheet there, and then again various presentation strategies, whether they're albums or shop displays of cabinet card photographers. And this whole section of the exhibit also kind of touches on sort of this next major grouping, which is how we see ourselves, and ourselves is obviously a term that is up for debate in these early photographs. So we have a bunch of painted tintypes here, which are really lovely. And a group of sort of more interesting regular size, CDV size tintypes here in this long, which show a sort of diversity of expression of portraiture in the tintype world, and a Bisson Frere portrait here, which leads on to both cabinet card portraits, but also family portraits or portraits of a group, a family tree, and a daguerreotype grouping, and some sort of interesting ones like this pairing of two cabinet cards, one of a man before he lost his eyesight and one of it after. These are really portraits of how the photography was used to portray people in life, but also in death. So there's a little exhibit of post and pre-mortems here, and post-mortem cabinet card, memorial cards, things like that. With this sort of general introduction into how we see ourselves in various guises in life and various media, in life and death, the family, we sort of narrow that down in the next section, which is more about how we see ourselves or our society at play. So whether it's a wrestling photograph or entertainers, cabinet cards indicating various entertainers, Saroni, things like that. How we chose to perform for the camera, whether it's a Titian knockoff, I mean not Titian, a Raphael knockoff, I always call it Titian for some reason, or showing us in masks. There are a few, there's a little nude, so this is leisure, performance, a Romeo and Juliet daguerreotype, trick photography, performative elements, this one slipping out of its frame slightly. The portrait of a dandy by Nedar, again a minstrel in blackface, a performer in a tintype studio, and that sort of, when we talk about looking at ourselves at play, we also go, of course, to the advent of the snapshot. So the only three cameras in exhibit are the original, the Kodak number 1 and Kodak number 2. Those are there too, with some strategies, or not strategies, but Kodak albums that actually belong to one of the cameras on display. Pictures of holidays, pictures of tourist pictures that we would have taken, and various other examples of us at play, humankind at play, or at leisure. Some of them quite interesting and provocative. And of course, when we start talking about ourselves at play, we also start looking at ourselves in more formal situations at work. So we then sort of morph into occupationals of various kinds, sometimes some sort of combination of the two. Can't see those particularly well, but that also leads to some Roger Fenton, Crimean War images, which leads to, I guess you would call this at work, sort of images of the military experience, a Legray here. A Adrien Tournachon, one of my favorite images of this cow show, this cattle show with the cow dung and patty first, front and foremost, and some examples of tintype occupationals. The at play section sort of segues into some sort of applied photography, photographs that have been used, either decorated or incorporated in other mediums by the leisure classes generally. I love very heavily painted photography. Album pages that have been highly decorated, but all this kind of applied photography in a way. Which brings us really to the next section of the exhibit, which is our changing world. And photography as it's applied to documenting the world around us. So some Thomson pictures from street life in London, which documents street life in London, so sort of sociological use of photography, to Durandal and the photography documenting Paris, 19th century Paris landmarks, and with that of course goes to the use of photography, whether it's for in a medical college and medical students, or an appendix that's taken out for a doctor, a Duchenne de Boulogne image of a child suffering from some sort of shoulder dislocation. One assumes this is something to do with hair loss. It's a very enigmatic image, and you know, an example of a mugshot. So these are also the applied use of photography as this medium to document this world that is changing around us. The use of photography in advertising, in telling stories about industrial production, which continues here too in this little case. Baling tongs, a tintype of an engine, and using for astronomy. I don't know if you can see that, astronomy, which of course also goes in here to a Loewen Puiseux image from the Atlas of the Moon, Muybridge, and studies of human locomotion and animal locomotion, and documentation of a new zoological garden in Paris, which is a pretty new acquisition, and I really love these 9 prints. So that sort of deals with the way photography starts to document a real changing world of industrialization, and gets used for different purposes, which there's a little introductory Talbot here, which is rather lovely in this group, which then sort of segues into these cabinet cards of arms and some documentary shots of locomotives. And I think what's kind of wonderful is that you get the sense of some of the earliest photographs, whether a Talbot, which presaged the use of photography as a medium throughout history. This use of photography to document our rapidly changing world kind of enters into the sort of is a segue into the last phase of the exhibit, which continues with that idea of industrialization and modernization, and the uses of photography both to celebrate newly created landmarks or landmarks that might be at risk from the changing world, sort of scientific discoveries or the use of microscopes, our changing landscape, industrial landscape in cities. This is New York City, the building of a subway, if I'm not mistaken, Pittsburgh, the Mississippi River, and then how that segues in and of itself into a more aestheticized view of the world, whether it's Aubrey, Study for a Vine, or Brown, Adolph Brown, and how that sort of photography morphs into a sort of more self-conscious artistic medium of expression. So there's the Juliet Margaret Camerons, and we go through the sort of the latter part of the 19th century. There's a Legray seascape into pictorialism, and camera work images, and whether it's Steichen or Coburn, and you sort of finally end up, whoops, this is all blurred. You finally end up, after a brief excursion into Stieglitzville, you finally end up at the steerage, which is kind of the final point of the exhibition.